Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 186 of the Pencils and Lipstick podcast. I'm Kat Caldwell, your hostess, and today we have an interview episode. I wanted to get this in before we hit July. The interview is with Claire Taylor, and we're going to talk about her Reclaim Your Author Career book. If you're watching, I'm holding it up right now. I wanted to get this in before July because she has some masterclasses coming up on how to use the Enneagram in your fiction writing, which I think is really interesting. And as somebody who resisted the Enneagram for years, like really years, believe me when I say it's actually very interesting and very helpful. I am not like an evangelist, I would say, yet, but I do understand that we need to understand personalities as writers. We need to understand a little bit of psychology, and I think that Claire has spent a lot of time in the Enneagram world and understanding that, and so she's a really good teacher, and she's a really good place to start with all the Enneagram things and how you can use it for yourself, for your author career, and for your fiction characters in your writing. So it is June 19th. Happy Juneteenth to all my American listeners, and happy Father's Day. It was yesterday. Before we get into the interview, I just want to let you guys know about a couple things. If you want to watch the show, if you want to see the people that I'm interviewing and see me and how I can't sit still, you can watch us on YouTube. The links are always going to be in the show notes below, but you can go to pencilsandlipstick.com. That's all spelled out, pencilsandlipstick.com/YouTube, and you'll go straight to the channel and you'll see all of the author interviews and me talking. Anything that we had video to put up, you will see there. You can look at people's faces if you want that instead of just listening. If you are looking for more information about the writing retreat that I'm putting together, have put together for Spain, the 17th through the 23rd in Toledo, Spain, you can click on the show notes below. Otherwise, you can go over to katcaldwell.com. There's a little pop-up there. It will take you straight to the landing page. Otherwise, there's a link in the show notes, katcaldwell.com/write-all-day, and you can just put in your email address on that landing page and the information will go straight to your inbox. So if that's just easier for you, you don't want to forget, maybe you're at work or whatever, you just want to pop in your email address, that information that is on the landing page goes straight to your inbox. And don't be afraid to ask me questions. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. You can just hit reply to the email and you can get me. I also in the email give you the option to set up a call with me to ask me all the questions that you want. So I am really excited to have this writing retreat. It is limited. There are only 10 spaces. So if you want to go, you should probably reserve your spot now. But I'm excited to share it with anybody who comes. I love my second country. Toledo, Spain is going to be an inspiring place to write all week, to rejuvenate ourselves in our creative process, to really advance in the project that we want to bring that week. You'll have me there to help you whenever you want. You'll have Marcy as well. So we have you covered whether you're doing nonfiction, memoir, or fiction. We are there to help you with pretty much anything, honestly. So that is all the announcements for now. This week I am actually in London. If you want to see me in London at the self-publishing show live, or I get to see Emma Dussey in person, we get to go have lunch together. You can follow that on my Instagram at katcaldwell.author. You know me, I'm a type 3. I'm an achiever. Claire will be telling you about that. So you can find me everywhere. It's like I'm everywhere at once. But with that, let's dive into this Reclaim Your Author Career using the Enneagram to build your strategy, unlock deeper purpose, and celebrate your career. This book by Claire Taylor, and why she wrote it, and all of the masterclasses and retreats that she has now centered around the Enneagram and how it has helped her in her career. Are you ready for fighting tragedy? Grief, lies, nightmares, death. Newlywed bliss turns sour for Faith and Angel when tragedy strikes the Sanchez family. Past and present warp reality, trapping Angel in a living hell in his own mind. And the more Faith tries to reach her husband, the stronger his demons grow. While darkness closes in around them, is love enough to fight through the tragedy of death? Find Fighting Tragedy by Ashley Kay, available on Amazon. All right, welcome back everyone to Pencils and Lipstick. I'm excited today to have with me Claire Taylor. She is a writer, she is a podcaster, and she helps authors with their career. Is that good? Hi Claire,
Yeah.
how are you?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you
Excited to
do
be
so many
here.
things. I'm like, okay, she has the head of FFS Media. She's the Somewhere Book Show co-host. You have a million series. I mean, like maybe a little less than a million series.
Yeah.
You've got the credit behind you. So tell us a little bit more of who you are before we get into this.
Well, I think first and foremost, I'm a fiction writer that's just wanted to do this my whole life. And I've wanted to do it the right way, like I want to make sure that I have the most on point way of approaching it. And so in doing that, I made a lot of mistakes.
As we all
And
do.
yes, a lot. I have years of mistakes behind me that I'm very grateful in my more enlightened moments and kind of annoyed by in all the other moments. So in creating my own fiction career, I really had to figure out how to do it so that it worked for me.
Mm.
I've been called stubborn or she has to do things the way she wants to do
You're
them,
a
that sort of
Texan.
thing.
Like that's what
Yeah.
it is
True.
inbred in you. Like
Yes, I'm going to do it the way I think it should be done. Very independent over here. Um, yeah, so I had to figure it out for myself. And in doing that and building my own career, and I have quite a few pen names because I
okay.
won't be contained. You can't fence me in. But in doing that, I started using the Enneagram
Okay.
to to build my own career, to make sure that I had some sort of criteria for, oh, okay, this works really well for this person, but I can
Okay.
see why this would not work for me. And so I was using that for my own career. And then it slowly became a thing that I found myself helping all of my author friends with. And then it kind of blossomed into this Enneagram consulting and
This
coaching that I do
side
now for
project that you
authors.
do.
Yeah, just another side business, just two full-time businesses. So no, I am working. This is the phase of my life where I'm working to do less work,
Oh,
but
I like that.
I'm still practicing.
So when you say you wanted to do like fiction writing correct, what did that mean to you? Like following rules or like going traditional or what did that mean?
Well, I did go to school for writing and
Your
to
parents let you
college.
do that? Like
They did. Well, my dad's a music teacher. He doesn't have much
okay.
ground to stand on. My sister did the whole business thing, and so she got her MBA and all that. So I got to be kind of the liberal arts,
Nice.
letting everyone down. And so I went to school for that, and it made me want to stop writing because
Okay, that's not good.
it was very much like you can only do the traditional path,
Okay.
and literary fiction is the only real form of writing, and everything else is just playtime, and it's not true writing and all of that. And
Yeah.
I just didn't have much of a desire to write literary fiction.
Yeah, we
And
don't even know what that is really, honestly.
right, it's whatever your professor says it is, frankly. And so I was kind of like put off for a while,
Mm,
from the traditional publishing sort of
okay.
route, but I just couldn't stop writing, and I write comedy. And that was not super respectable. And so
Mm,
I said, screw it, I'm going to go do this my way. And then I found out about the whole world of indie publishing and
right.
was like,
Okay.
this is how I'm going to do it. But this was back in 2014, and there wasn't really a roadmap.
No.
So there still isn't a roadmap, frankly, even though a lot of people pitch there being a very clear roadmap to your dreams. It can be a very profitable thing to pitch, but
Right.
yeah. So I was having to figure it out, and there are just a million ways to decide. So I was asking myself, well, how do I decide what is right for me?
Right.
And this, this process of the Enneagram made it a lot clearer. But before I found was really working with the Enneagram, I was stumbling all over the place. So I wanted to help people who, you're never guaranteed success,
Yeah.
like, financial success, whatever that means to you in this industry. So why would you sacrifice what you want to be doing and what works for you to try and get that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? Because it's not guaranteed.
No, it's honestly not. And that's what I feel the worst when people come to me and ask me things. They're like, well, first of all, you'll spend a lot of money. Like, and you might not make it back. That sounds terrible. Come join us over here in the indie publishing world. But
Yeah.
did you feel like you were successful before you found the Enneagram? Or like, was the Enneagram something that you did for your personal life, or did you go straight to it to try to figure out the author life?
It was something that, so I had first encountered the Enneagram back in high school.
Oh,
My
wow.
mom and
Okay.
my sister were really into it, and I couldn't have cared less about it at the time. And they had me take the test, and I tested as what I now know is not my type.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so I read about it, and I was like, well, this is bogus, right? Because when you get mistyped in any way, any form of, any part of the process of finding your type, you're like, well, this is obviously not useful. And it's like,
Right.
well, of course it's not useful. That's not your type. So that was what I experienced. Like, so I knew about it and I'd heard
Okay.
about it. And it wasn't until I got into a mastermind with some other indie authors back in
Oh,
2015, 2016, somewhere around there, that we started talking about it again. We started going through together and figuring out our types. And then that helped us talk to each other. We do hot seats, we do
okay.
these sorts of things each week. And so we started to be able to figure out, okay, why is the advice that I'm giving to you not clicking with you? Well, we have different motivation.
Oh,
So then we were able to better tailor our advice to each other and give, suggestions and not just waste each other's time by being like, no, you should do it this way. And the person being like,
yeah.
I don't want to do it that way.
That's very
So
smart. It's very
right,
insightful.
it was very useful. So then it became kind of this language,
Okay.
and it was my friend Alyssa Archer, who's an author, really good author, and an editor as well, a really great editor as well. And she was kind of the one that was into it at the time and brought it into that group. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with this. But as soon as I tested and got my correct type and read about it, it was like light bulbs. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is my whole life explained.
Yeah.
These are all of my problems and why. And so then I started using it for just life stuff and
Right.
business stuff. And then I was like, well, why wouldn't I be using this for my characters too, and to help me get to know my protagonist, my antagonist. And so then I started using that when I was writing my Jessica Christ series, and it was just very, very helpful.
Yeah.
And so that I started doing it more. And then when people would call me, because I was an editor, like after college I was like an editor for a long time, and so I have a lot of experience with that and with teaching. I taught for a while, but people would call me asking for story advice, and it kept coming back to like, well, your character has mixed motivations here. They're part you and they're part this other Enneagram type, so let me tell you about this Enneagram type, and so you can like keep that consistent motivation.
Okay.
And so then that's kind of how it started. And then I realized, like, oh, I should just make this an offering to everyone. So you don't have to have like randomly met me at a conference to get this sort of help.
So that's why you started writing the Reclaim Your Author Career book, or did you do
Yes,
something
that was
before
years
that?
later. That was
Oh,
years later.
goodness.
Yeah. So I
Yeah, I
started
feel like
doing
COVID's a
consulting.
whole, so it's like when you say 2016, I'm like, that's not that far away because I forget.
Right. 7 years ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. All right, so you were already like consulting on this, like on the side, not being paid,
Yeah.
as we do.
Well, yeah. Well, I was getting paid. I was getting paid, and I was creating courses and that sort of thing. But
Okay.
there was just, thankfully, I have friends who have different Enneagram lenses from me and are a little bit more savvy at this whole business thing. And we're like, there's a hole in your funnel. Like, you need to, your
Okay.
sales funnel. Like, and then I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, I don't have just a book. And for me, it was like, well, obviously I'm going to publish a book. I'm a writer. Why don't I have a book about this? This is stupid. So I started writing it, and I figured that it was a good way to introduce people, because it's a book is much, much cheaper than like coming to a workshop or anything like
Hmm.
that, so that people can kind of see if it works for them or not.
Yeah.
And I wanted the book to be something that a person could sit and read from cover to cover, and not necessarily need to come do more work with me or pay for the next thing. Like, it needed to be standalone, so it's not just
Right.
a sales
Right.
pitch. For me, that was very important, because I don't like it when it's like, oh, this is a great book, and you read it and it's like kind of shows you the problem, but it's like, if you want the answers, buy this next course. Like, that irks me. So,
It's like
so I wrote this.
Scientology all over.
Right. I don't want an MLM. I don't want to start a cult. Like the idea of starting a
Really?
cult, it's like, oh, so many people like looking to me and relying on me for answers. No thanks. Not this child-free writer. So yeah, it was just sort of like a, well, this can help a lot more people. I can kind of scale
Right.
that help for people. And so I started writing it, and it was, yeah, it's the first nonfiction I've done, actually, the first nonfiction book. And
Was it easy?
cool.
Because
No,
it's okay.
no,
So
it was
there's a
not.
lot in here. And like I feel like it's one of those books when you know a lot about something because you've personally gone through it, it would be hard to bring it down to, I mean, it's not a very like 220 pages.
Yeah.
Like that must have been difficult to be like, I know all these things. How about we just talk?
Yeah, I know. I know. It was a very difficult process to go to nonfiction. I think there are probably people who are better at doing that, but like for me, I'm like, I want to just give you all that I know about this. I want to give you all of the tools because like I can't be helping everyone, but I want everyone to have the
Right. Oh,
tools,
that's
you know?
smart though. Yeah, that's
Um,
really smart.
so yeah, it was really hard. And once I had finished that book and was like done with it, I was like, I'm never writing nonfiction again.
Never say
So
never.
obviously I already have multiple other projects in the works for nonfiction.
Especially for a writer, you can't say that. I will never write
Right.
again. But
Absolute amnesia about all of my sworn statements.
yes, good thing nobody's recording us when we
I
say these
know.
things.
I know.
So I told you before, but I'll tell the audience like I started reading it because of Troy from Plotter, Troy Lambert, and he was like, "You have to get this book. This will like just open your eyes as to what is wrong and what's going wrong in your author career, why you're frustrated." And there were so many that he was correct, first of all. And I was like, "Oh, Enneagram." I think it's because it was such a big deal in 2016, and I was like, the people that were talking about it around me, I was like, like, I know why you're into that because you want to tell me what to do, and I don't want to do that because
Hmm.
I'm an achiever and I don't want anyone to don't tell me what to do. So, but I trust Troy, and I was like, okay, you know what, I should probably figure out my resistance to something and like give it a go before I say no. And I have to say that I now recommend it to everybody.
Yes, that makes my little type 1 reformer heart so happy.
Right, you are reforming me as I go. Um, so there's several things in here, especially and I think you've talked about this with Brian Cohen on the Sell More Book show. I feel like I hear your voice instead of reading your voice. But especially like in the indie author career, I think you've said something of like everyone who goes on stage is a certain Enneagram type, and what they're doing is working for them, and all the rest of us are frustrated in our seats because we're like, why is it not working for me? And that was like, that is so true because it takes a certain person to get up there and to get to a certain level and to be just like telling everyone what works for them, right? And
Yes.
then when you're in the seat and you're like, I think I tried that and it's not quite working for me. And it might be because you are a completely different personality, right?
Hmm.
And that was like the first eye-opening thing for me. It's like, why am it's not bad to listen to them, right? But you have
Hmm.
to understand who you are and how it
Hmm.
fits with your career. Is that is that true?
Yeah.
Or am I
Yeah.
missing?
Is that in the book? If you put it in
Is
the
it?
book, it's true.
I feel like you said
No,
this.
it's, yeah, no, absolutely. There are certain types that are, listen, it takes a lot of time and effort to get yourself onto a stage
Mm,
and to prepare for it and to do it. So to do that, you have to be very motivated to be on a stage. And that motivation tends to sort of lean towards type threes or type eights who like to be up there and say, be in front of a crowd. Threes are very motivational by nature. They love to motivate people to work hard. That's what they're good at. That's a gift. You have, they're very inspiring. Oprah is a Enneagram type three, the achiever. Taylor Swift is an Enneagram type three, the achiever, right? So um, that's a personality that likes to be on stage, but there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're not that type, the motivation that they're trying to give you doesn't always hit, or it's sort of fleeting, right? You
Mm,
can leave
okay.
feeling very charged up, right? Like, oh yeah, if I just work hard, I can do this, right? And that can work for a little while, but if that's not your motivation, to have the same things that they want to have, it's not going to motivate you in the same way, and you're going to leave, and you're going to be like, sometimes that sort of that crash afterwards turns
Right.
into, I'm just a failure. I just don't
Right.
work hard enough. I must not want it bad enough. That sort of negative self talk. So that's the problem that arises from it. But yeah, so a lot of the teachers are similar Enneagram types, like the same Enneagram types. A lot of the leaders, a lot of the people telling you you can be a, you know, six-figure author if you just do X, Y, or Z tend to be type threes. And the
Mm,
people who are still making money really, in this industry tend to be type threes. And so for the, and at least those are the ones that are highly visible, because
right. Right.
visibility
Right.
does tend to matter to that type. There are plenty of other types who are making money and just don't talk about it, or that sort of thing. So, and this is not to dunk on type threes, obviously.
I'm a type
But
three, so that's fine.
right. Yeah. So no,
But I'm not
nothing
on a
personal
stage.
here. Yeah, you're not on a stage, but you do have a podcast.
This is
um,
true. Oh my gosh.
yeah, and my podcast was started by a type three as well, and I just jumped on. So, um, yeah, it's just to say that as an example, not everyone
Hmm.
is motivated by
Exactly.
the same things, and so there's no defect in it if someone is
Right.
motivated by a different thing from you.
Yeah, and I think that's just really important to keep in mind. You also have your type 3, and you talk about your motivation and like your whys, and like getting into your background, like taking time to figure out what you want. Because like we
Mhm.
said in the beginning a few minutes ago, like success isn't guaranteed in this business, like any business, right? And it's a hard business to find success, so it's, well, depending on what success means to you, right? And to be
Mhm.
honest with yourself, and to really like, it's for your author career, but it's a bit of a soul searcher as far as books go. But I think because the career is so difficult, and it's a lot of times just yourself, it's really necessary to do this and to understand yourself. Otherwise you're going to burn out, or you're going to feel like a failure, because you're not like whoever, like whoever you're
Exactly.
looking up to. They might be a great reader, a writer, but they're not your type. And like you might not be trying to achieve JK Rowling
Mhm.
status. You're just
Mhm.
trying to sell your book. you know
Right. There's a big middle ground between not
right.
books not selling and JKR. There's a big middle ground where you can make a uh, very robust living, or you can make a little bit of a side pot off of this, and maybe you have a 9 to 5. Some types prefer to have a 9 to 5 because it creates that security. It allows them to have the money they need for the freedom they're looking for, and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's just a big range of ways to do this. And you can also do this in there's the full range. You could do it at any point in the full range and still be miserable doing it.
Right.
So it's really not about how much money you're making, how many books you're selling. It's about learning how to be happy.
Yes.
um, and with whatever it is, and not fearing that if you are happy or satisfied in the moment, you will lose all of your drive, because that's just not how it happens. And I think that's kind of a fear that people are like, well, if I'm not dissatisfied, if I'm not a little bit miserable the whole time, if I'm not struggling, then I don't know what will be motivating me. There's that fear that nothing will be motivating you, that you'll just say, well, if I'm not afraid of failure, then I'm never going to, um, you know, try for more.
Right.
Or if I don't care about the details, then I'm just going to give up and produce the sloppiest work ever, and I'm going to tank my career and blah, blah, blah. But it's so people are often motivating themselves with this fear, this core fear that is the definition of each type. Um, and in doing so, they're making themselves miserable rather than trusting that if they confront that fear
Hmm.
and sort of think it all the way through and dismantle it and deconstruct it a little bit, uh, that there's still something that is bringing you to writing, and you will still want
Right.
to write. You may want to
Right.
write in a different way, and it may just feel a whole lot better when you do it.
Yeah, yeah, and to really understand those fears and what you actually want from success. I don't know about you, but I tried all the like personal motivations when I hit 30. It was like, oh my gosh, I have to
Mhm.
reevaluate my life. You know, like
Yeah.
I'm going to do all these things. Maybe it was like a big deal then. I don't know. Um, but this is really focusing mostly on like your author career. Of course, you can bring it into other things in your
Mhm.
life, right? But to really take the time to understand what motivates you, what success means to you, why would you keep writing, at what point would you keep writing? And I think that it then helps you in this author space to be comfortable with what you've decided to be comfortable with, right? Because at like people have different motivations and different success levels, and are you actually going to be okay with like seeing your series consistently sell and making, an extra x amount of money, if that's true, and then to be comfortable with it and to like,
Mhm.
you know what, it's okay if your motivation is different than mine. But I think if you understand it, then you are less likely to change your motivations and your idea of success just because somebody else at a conference said something different.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good information at any conference, right? It's a little bit like a fire hose. So like once you know your motivation and know what you're trying to achieve and what your strategy is based on your motivation, you are able to easily filter out anything that's not relevant and find stuff that could be relevant and asking yourself, how do I change this so that it's relevant to me? How do I do
Mm,
this in a way that's going to support what I'm trying to achieve here? So it may not just be a hard yes or hard no to different, techniques and tactics, but it could be um, I kind of like that, but I have to figure out how to do that in my way.
yeah, yeah, and to know that that's an option, like,
Right. Yeah. That's a lot of it. It's just people don't feel like they're allowed to do things the way they deep down would love to do them.
right, right. So you not only wrote the book, which I, once again, the links will be in the show notes, but I think everyone should read because I think it definitely helps with this overwhelm that can come sometimes with this job. Like summer's about to hit, probably by the time this is out, everyone's kids are out. Like that is a ridiculous time of year. If you have kids and you're a writer, you're just like going crazy. Like learning
Hmm.
to know who you are and what your author career should, what you want it to look like, whatever. But then you have other workshops and retreats. And is that to go deeper, or is that what
Yes.
is that difference there?
Yeah, these are to go deeper. So this is
Okay.
the book can only be so individualized, right? Because
Okay.
we're talking about 9 types, but within each type there's subtypes that I don't get into in the book because that's like, let's not make everyone's head explode just yet. There's all kinds of different ways of expressing it, and of course Enneagram isn't the end all be all. It's sort of the base level of the person upon which there's these overlays from other people and other values put on them and background and past trauma and all these other layers.
Okay.
So when we do stuff like the workshops or the master classes or the retreats, we're really, it's a smaller group so we can get more individualized.
Okay.
um, so the ones that I have coming up, the two that I have coming up are master classes this summer, and these are just fun story nerd stuff. So we're doing Enneagram and fiction, so how you use it for your fiction,
Okay.
for creating protagonists, antagonists, developing your themes, all that stuff. And then the next one is the hero's journey of the Enneagram. So for those like big, big story nerds, we're going to talk about how the Enneagram type of your protagonist actually determines what their, what the supreme ordeal will look like for them, what the elixir will be for your hero or heroine. And so those are the two. It's very fiction based, but yeah, there's retreats. I have a new course coming up that's going way deep into it, but we can talk about that later.
So I like how you use this for fiction because I do think there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of great books on writing fiction, but this is interesting because it's going really deep into like understanding your characters in a way that is different than what I have seen. And I have developmental edited quite a few manuscripts by now, and there's always, before I read this book, I was like, there's something off. Like your character wouldn't do this. The way that you've
Mhm.
set them up, now all of a sudden they're doing something completely different. And when I read the book, I was like, yes, we should have some sort of psychology and like personality information like in our brains as writers, because that is one of the issues I think with when you put a book down, because you're like, what? Why is this character suddenly so different? And why did they do that? I have thrown a couple books across the room in my lifetime of like, no, I don't know why, but no, now I know why.
Yeah, exactly. So the different types are defined by a core fear and core desire. Um, and so that is really what helps you determine what your character is going to do in stress points. And so what I found, and through like my developmental editing and looking at, just reading a lot, is that the problem seems to be when the author is writing a protagonist who is a different Enneagram type from themselves.
Okay.
So then they're writing this protagonist, and the Enneagram types are very intuitive. We've all met these types. We've seen these clusters of patterns that arise from the core motivations. And so it's familiar to us, even if we don't have the language for it. The Enneagram is
Mm,
just the language for it. And so once we start to understand how these, correlate to the behaviors tend to arise from the feelings and the beliefs that arise from this motivation, um, once we understand that, we can deconstruct why that character would not do that thing.
mm,
So what happens is that the author is, let's say, a type 2, and she's writing a protagonist who's a type 7, and something stresses out the protagonist, the type 7 protagonist, and you're like, why would it stress them out? Well, it wouldn't. It would stress out a type 2. And
oh,
so the author has gotten to the point of thinking, well, what would I do in this situation? And it's a different thing because the stressors are different for different types. What's going to freak out a type 7 is not going to freak out a type 2 necessarily, and vice versa. So it's that mixing when we're not clear on the different types, when we haven't really sorted that in our brain and attached the language to it, we tend to mix these. And
right.
sometimes it can be a result, or it can be a product of, I need to get this character to the next scene. So I'm
Right.
just going to make them do this thing to get them there.
Yes.
Which there's always a way, once you know their type, there's always a way to get them to do exactly what you need to do, because you know the stick and you know the carrot, you know the fear and you know the desire. So if you need to get, your type 6, the loyalist, whose core fear is to be unsupported and without guidance, and if you need to get them to move from Seattle to New York, well, you know how to get them there. You scare the crap out of them in Seattle and you promise them safety in New York,
Yeah.
right? So that is going to motivate that character. If you do that to a type 8, it's just that the challenger, theirs is very different. They're looking at, how can I be strong? So if you scare a type 8, they tend to want to fight you. They're not gonna move from Seattle to New York, right? They're gonna be like, oh, you think you can scare me? You think you can hurt me? Well, I'm gonna show you. Like, don't try and exert power over me. So the different motivations are there, but once you know it, it's like, I can get them to go and do whatever I want.
Right, right. And we talk about fear and desire a lot in the indie world, and I feel like there's a lot of information out there that will just make you feel like you're insane. Um, and you have to have a fear, you have to have it, and it's true, but this makes it very easy to
Yep.
figure out those fears and those desires, and then and what's interesting is like I think a lot of writers are scared that that's going to become formulaic, which is
Mm-hmm.
interesting. No, it actually just helps you then not like freak out about like if you're writing your character correctly, then you have like the freedom to be very creative in the
Yeah.
plot because you're secure in how your character is going to get there because you understand them. You don't have to write a first draft just to get to know the character now.
Right. It's absolutely not formulaic because, humans don't appear formulaic to us when we go out. Humans are complex beings, and yet these Enneagram frameworks are still at play. So any type can look a lot of different ways.
Mhm.
There are gonna be similarities, but they can change based on culture, how those fears and desires play out. What is a good person in one culture, right? So if you're a type 1, the reformer, you're worried about being good and not evil. And so that kind of decides what you do. If you think that that's the right thing to do, you will do it. But what is the right thing to do? That's going to look different in different situations. It's going to look different in different cultures. It's going to look different for men versus women a lot of the times, right?
Right.
Women have, doing the right thing looks very different for a woman. or it's expected to look very
Yes.
different for a woman. Um, so there's so many other factors that it is just this easy thing. And I know it's going to seem, like it can seem overwhelming, but like the Enneagram has been developed from thousands of years of wisdom. It's been developed intensely in the last 100 years by people with PhDs and MDs. Like
Right.
they've done the work for you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel now, like you can just work from this because it's used by clinicians. I mean, my therapist uses it. It's like it's a thing that just has been proven true. So you don't have to like worry about it. It's just it's the closest thing to a character hack that you can find, really.
Right, right. And I like you said, we kind of know it intuitively, so your readers are going to know. So you
Hmm.
might as well just I just find it helpful, and I would encourage people to do it. And like if you understand personalities and why people react the way that they do, you are going to be able to write your characters in your books better. Just like I don't know
Yeah.
how else to say that.
You
Like,
do need to know people to write
yes,
people. It's
to
the
write people,
unfortunate
even
truth. It
personified
helps.
animals. We all need that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I have a paranormal cozy mystery series. All my familiars have types as well.
Yeah, 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 you got to do that. I mean, and it actually makes it really rich. Like your story is very rich instead of having the characters that are all type 2, all type 3, all type, a lot of times like I think at one point you say you usually marry or date or your partner is the opposite and so I made my husband do it and I was like, "Look at that." This is why we don't understand each other.
Yeah, well, and it's so fun because every pairing of types, you're gonna have some overlaps where you're like 100% agree, couldn't agree
Right,
more, and then
right.
you're gonna have some like differences where you're like, I think you might be from a different planet,
Exactly.
right? And so it's like every pairing of characters you can throw at each other is gonna have those differences and those similarities. And so you can play on that with your protagonist, antagonist, with romantic, any romantic partners. And it's just good fun because you know what to bring out when you need conflict. And if, okay, I need these enemies to become allies. That's one of my favorite tropes. Where they're going to overlap and have a shared sort of shared action based on what their motivations are, and so
Right,
you
and
know
it's
how to
gonna
team
be
them up.
believable. Like,
Yes.
it's not gonna be like, "What?"
And when they need to break apart again, you just put them in different directions by motivating them in two different directions.
Right, because 'cause they're not gonna change, like, that's the thing too, that people don't change 180 degrees by the end of a book,
Hmm.
like, that's not
Right.
we learn, we
Yeah,
don't
right.
change.
And that's the thing that's important with the Enneagram is that there's 9 levels of development for each type. So you don't have static characters just because you're using the Enneagram. You can, they're going to move up and down just as humans do. We move up and down these levels of health, and it's based on self awareness and self knowledge where you are in that moment. Um, and so you can have a character that starts kind of in these low average levels of health, that they're
Mm,
not very aware of their patterns of behavior and thought and speech and everything. And then because of that, something happens that sort of jolts them in your inciting incident, and then you have them have to kind of search for answers for the rest of it. And by the end, maybe they're at more of like a high average developmental level or like a healthy level. Or if it's a tragedy, then they're probably starting or they're ending at a lower health level than what they started at. So yeah, it just gives you a lot to work with, and there's all kinds of resources. So if you're like, how am I supposed to remember like the 9 developmental levels for 9 types? Well, you don't. There are lots of books on this, lots of research. So,
and there's workshops
and
with
there's
Claire.
workshops, yeah. And I'll show you how to use the tools, and then you can go get your references for it.
Yes, yes, and you even touch on, writing series because you write series, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, like, how to keep consistent with the series and, like, whether you're planning it now, you kind of go into that, or whether you're kind of stuck because you didn't plan it before and now you have to keep going. But that's what I find really interesting about the Enneagram because I had studied like the big top 5 personality types, which
Hmm.
I think is somewhat helpful. But the way that you went into how because by the end of book one, a lot of times we have our character really high, like they're riding a high, they're so
Hmm.
healthy, they're doing great, and you're like, oh no, I have like 8 more books. I have to write. And I love how you don't shy away from that and how you go through a series, especially if you are, not yet stuck in it, but then how to get out of it if you're slightly stuck.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about writing these characters is that they are just people, and people have to learn the same lessons over and over again and in new ways. It's like I may have learned a lesson in one small part of my life. That doesn't mean my brain has applied it to every other
Right.
part of my life. And it doesn't mean that I necessarily learned the full lesson. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to remember the lesson. So yeah, there's all, and then there's, a bajillion lessons that we need to learn. So I get that question a lot when I'm presenting on this sort of thing. Like, well, if you have them learn what they need to learn by the end, what do you do in the next book? Like, you teach them something else. We're dumb in a lot of ways. Like, we can,
Yes.
your protagonists can learn a lot of things. They could learn 100 books worth of things and still have more to learn. You might likely get sick of writing them at that point or before that point, but if you were really into it, you could just keep going.
Right, right. Yes. So I have learned a lot from this, and I know that for fiction it's really great. So I would highly recommend people go and check out the master classes. I might have to check out one, honestly, just to see how what I can do, because as you talk about people not learning all their lessons, sometimes for the next book, I'll probably have to start at square one. Just like go back. Like, okay, let's take an Enneagram test and just figure this out again. But I also thought, like, once you're done with your book, for any listener out there that's like, okay, great, I can, figure out my fiction characters better. Maybe it will help me write faster, whatever they're dreaming about right now. Um, what's also interesting is that you talk about how to market, and that was one of the biggest points, like for my Enneagram type, that I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better now. Like, I don't have to market to everyone, which, yeah, you kind of know that, your book isn't for everyone. But when you break it down with the Enneagram, I was like, I all I have to do is find my people. I don't know why it
Mm-hmm.
took me this long, but it did.
Well, I mean, it probably didn't take you as long to figure out as it took me to figure out, right? So we're all figuring it out together. And that is a big thing because you just want people to read your book so bad. It's not it's not abnormal for an author to become a little bit thirsty in that way,
Right.
Um, but the truth is that there's that 1,000 true fans that we need, and if we got 1,000 true fans, that'd be great. You'd be off to a fantastic start in your author career, and you can find 1,000 people that are into anything,
Yes.
frankly. If the internet has taught me anything, right? If the depths of the internet have taught me anything, it's that you can find 1,000 people that are into anything. So it's really about starting from what you're into, what you want to produce, figuring out the words for it, who it
Mm-hmm.
is for, which the Enneagram helps us with, and then blasting that out in whatever way is comfortable to you. You don't have to do all the things. You don't have to even do social media, frankly. There are plenty of authors who don't really do social media, but have found a way that works for them to
Right.
make the kind of, book sales that feel good. So,
Right, right. Yeah, you can get off the hamster wheel. And I think David Gockrin even says this, but um he doesn't quite go into how to do it, but he talks about how, like, you can get 60,000 people on your author newsletter. Fine. You're on your
yeah.
list, you're sending out all these emails. If they are not the people who are going to read your book, it's worthless. And that was one of the points that I really resonated with finding my Enneagram, and then finding what types of stories I tend to write. And then, okay, now I'm going to go and find the people who tend to like those types of stories and get off the hamster wheel of going to try to convince all the other types that they're going to like my book, because
Yeah.
maybe like, why
Yeah.
spend the money and time doing that?
Well, and it's a very human impulse to try to find metrics to show
Mm,
that we are, progressing. So those metrics a lot of the times are like, how many Instagram followers do I have? How many subscribers do I have? Right? Those are easy, sort of low hanging metrics that
right.
can help us chart progress. And it could be useful if it's one of the metrics and not the only metric, or that, all of our metrics are these sorts of like follower count metrics or subscribers, because we know that those don't necessarily convert.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people who we look at and we go, oh my gosh, they have so many subscribers. They must be so, or so many followers. They must be, so famous. Wow, I'm so impressed. I just want to do whatever they tell me. You can buy followers, right? So we don't want to judge other people's success on these because they can be fraudulent. And we also don't want to, judge our own success on this because it can be fickle.
Right.
And there are a lot of authors who are making what they need to write full time, and you wouldn't know it based on how many subscribers they have or
Right.
how many followers they have, because that's just not where they're finding the people, or the people who are following them are so rabid that they're like, yes, whatever you have, just tell me where to put my credit card number.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think it's about really evaluating what metrics are going to make us happy, and what
Mm-hmm.
metrics are going to keep us writing day after day when this is a difficult and often lonely job.
Right. Yeah.
And that could just be a metric of, did I write a scene that made me laugh today?
Right.
Right? That's a perfectly good metric, and that's the kind of thing that's going to keep you writing.
Yes. Yes. And not um going after people who aren't going to resonate with your books will probably keep you not from writing from not writing. Like I think it will help you in your mental health in the long run to just sort of have this full circle of how you can sit down and write. You understand your characters better because of it. You understand yourself. And then when you go out into market, I cringe at any sort of marketing because most of us just want to write and then pass the book off and have somebody
Right.
else market, but we're all alone. You won't just drive yourself crazy, and you won't I tell people you won't get those crazy reviews because you marketed it to the wrong person. And like, if you understand yourself and your books and your marketing, like come back full circle, you won't get this, I don't understand this book, and now it's a review on Amazon forever.
Right. And usually those decisions that lead to that sort of not ideal reader are results of either a need for instant gratification, or you've been triggered in some way,
Mm,
And so it's like, ooh, I've been triggered. My core fear has been triggered. This is, something feels like a threat to my identity and my sense of self. And so now I've got to go, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take this promotion, for my Jessica Christ series that puts it in the religious and spirituality, like, yeah, okay, that'll get me some reads, right? Because I'm just like, I need more book
right.
sales. And then I go and it's somehow, under Christian literature, and everyone's mad at me now because
Because she
it
said,
really splits a room. It really splits a room, that
I think
series.
it's a great idea though. I think it's a wonderful idea.
Well, it would get me some sales, but it would get me the wrong sales, right? It would get me a lot of
Right.
one-star reviews, with
Right.
the, out of context Bible quotes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. You might not want to get there. Yes. I
Yeah, it's
have
not really, I mean, if that's your thing, that's fine, but that's just not what that series is for.
exactly.
So,
And that's the thing, is understanding that and understanding yourself and your books better and then your market better. Right. So like
yeah.
having that full circle so that like you always talk about just being happy and content in your author career. We don't have to be the miserable artists all the
Oh, no, don't do that. Definitely don't do that. There are all kinds of ways to be miserable in this world. Don't make your writing one of them.
right. We don't want to romanticize that. So,
No.
you have more information about this. You have
Mhm.
a YouTube channel all
I do.
about writing with the Enneagram as well. What is that called?
Yeah, that's the I don't know what the channel's even called, but if you go to ffs.media/YT for YouTube, not because I'm white. Um, but if that helps you remember it, go for it. Um, that has all of my basic videos. And these are just introductory videos. So if you're just trying to figure out what is the Enneagram, this is my
Right.
free resources, because it's like, I don't need to, here it is. You can learn it on your own time, see if it's something for you. Um, my motivation is not to make a ton of money off of this. My motivation is to just reach as many people as I can. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of how I start, especially because I get these same questions over and over again. And it's
Right.
like, hey, here's a great place to explore on your own time. and come back if you think that anything that I'm doing is useful and you want more of it, you know. So yeah, there's that. Uh, there is, I have a free course actually. I just remembered, and this is the 5-day author alignment, indie author alignment course. If you go to www.ffs.media/5day, and that's like the number 5 in day.
Okay.
That is basically, it's laid out the same way as my book. So we
Okay.
talk about creative values, persona, themes, and protagonists, and then bringing it all together. And that's for free. That's for anyone who wants to get acquainted with it and have some resources and understand sort of the process that I work on with authors. That is there. That's available.
So that's a great place to start. And then if you want to get the book, or if you want to check out the master classes, where would they go for that?
ffs.media/classes. Those are the summer classes.
You're so organized, Claire. Um, and I would highly recommend everyone get onto Claire's newsletter. You always talk about the things that are coming up,
Mhm.
and talk a little bit more about the Enneagram. And yeah, I encourage anyone to check it out. All the resources that she has, that Claire has, both on YouTube and in the free course. See if it is something that will help you. Honestly, just have more fun writing and in your author career. Right? We want more
Yeah.
happy authors out there.
And life is short. Life is short, y'all. And do it enjoying the thing you want to enjoy. But also, if you are one of those people and you're listening and you're like, ugh, the Enneagram, I get it. I get it. I can't tell you how many people have been like, I was rejecting the Enneagram. And then because all my friends talked about it and they made it sound like a cult. And
Exactly.
right. Yeah, you know, Kat. Or I had some friends who were really into it and they, maybe used it dismissively, like, ugh, you're such an 8, right?
Right.
That sort of thing. That ain't what it's about. So give give my stuff a try. It's not dismissive. It's not just like, we're not sorting you into Hogwarts houses, right? It's useful. It's useful information that can help you get to know yourself better, and not only get to know yourself better, but get to enjoy yourself more. So
Yes.
um, that is my disclaimer. It's if someone treated it like a cult, they didn't understand it because it's a liberation, not a control mechanism.
As some good Americans will always do, they will find a way
I
to.
know. Yeah, life
I am the
finds a
head
way.
Enneagram person. You must do as I say. But I do have to say, like, yeah, that is one reason that I rejected it for a while. But you're very good about not calling any one particular, type out. It's just like, this is how we are, and it's okay. Like, let's just get to know ourselves and each other and our characters. And honestly, like, I, as somebody who tried to reject it a long time, I was telling you earlier, like today with my daughter, I'm like, listen, you are a type. I haven't had her do that. Like, you're a certain type and you need to not expect the same things from your friends because they're different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It really does help you, both in your own author career and with writing. So thank you so much, Claire, for coming on and telling us. I know there's a lot to talk about in just 40 minutes, so that we didn't even cover everything, but I will have the links in the show notes below for people to get to know you even better.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Kat. This was fun.